Hi everyone, I am Kate Hutchison, also known on Instagram as Bookish Kate NYC. And for this episode of Shelf Conscious, I'm sitting down with Nicole Caputo, who wears two hats. She's creative director of Counterpoint and art director of Catapult.
Yes.
So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for asking me to come in and or for coming here and speaking about our books and what we do at Catapult, Counterpoint, and it's an honor.
Great. Well, one of the reasons why I was particularly excited to be interviewing you is because book covers, we judge books constantly by them, but we don't really know about the process that goes into how our favorite books come to get their covers. So I know that we'll be getting to two titles that you worked on very different capacities. But before we get there, can you tell us a little bit about your day job and how you got a foot in the door in publishing and how that worked out?
Sure. So before Catapult, I was at an indie publisher and called Basic Books. They were part of Perseus Books Group. Counterpoint was actually at the time an imprint at Perseus. I started as a junior designer there and eventually ended up becoming the art director of Counterpoint and then the VP creative director of the whole group.
Also, such a small publishing world, just stories coming full circle.
I know, it's really beautiful, and I absolutely loved Counterpoint, working on Counterpoint titles. And I was on a vacation, they sold the imprint, and I came back and was devastated. But Counterpoint was fiction, almost all fiction at that point, and the other list was nonfiction. So I worked at Basic Books for about 13 years. It was amazing. I got to really build the imprint and their aesthetic, their website, give them a consistent look for covers. And then at about 13 years, I was kind of getting a little bit itchy. I really wanted to work on more fiction. I was doing some fiction projects on the side as a freelancer. And I was starting to think about going out on my own, actually. And I had gone to an industry expo and was talking to a friend who was on a sales team that sold our books there, who also sells books for Counterpoint Catapult. And over his shoulder, I saw a banner for Counterpoint at the booth and said, "Oh my gosh, Counterpoint, how are they doing?" And he said, "Come over, let me introduce you to Andy Hunter." And so I was talking to Andy about possibly freelancing.
And before we get into that, can you tell people who Andy Hunter is?
Yes, Andy Hunter is the publisher of Catapult, and a wonderful visionary, in my opinion.
That's exactly the word that I was going to say. Anyone who knows his name in publishing and knows who he is, it's a visionary. Yeah, definitely.
He's absolutely incredible. I feel very lucky to work here under his lead, and so I was thinking of just maybe freelancing for Counterpoint, and he asked me to come in for an interview, to come in-house and possibly work on all of their titles. And this was mainly going to be for Counterpoint at the time, hence my title, creative director of Counterpoint and art director of Catapult. They had Charlotte and Claire Strickland Williams were working on their covers.
And Charlotte and Claire, when we get to speaking about the books, they did the cover of this fantastic novel, Sea Monsters, which we'll get to. So
yes.
They were at Counterpoint before you.
Well, they were actually, they have their own design studio, which is fabulous, called Strickland Williams. Check them out if you are not aware of them already. And they were working on the covers for Catapult. They actually designed the logo as well, and did their branding. And they were doing it as part of their design studio. They were not in-house. So I was planning to just art direct them, because they were doing a fabulous job on covers, and then do more of the creative direction for Counterpoint, and work on their creating a consistent look for their covers and trying to expand their audience out, giving them a fresh, modern look to some of their backlist, and that's kind of how it came to be. And things have changed a bit since then, but that's how it came to be. I was thrilled when this opportunity came up. It was exactly what I had really been needing. To kind of branch out and become stimulated again, and also to work on some really great books, fiction and nonfiction.
And also, I would love to hear more about Catapult too, because going back to Andy Hunter, a visionary, one of the reasons why he is so known in publishing and is really forward-thinking and innovative is because, yes, Catapult is a book publisher, but there's a lot of other attributes of Catapult. So can you
Yes.
speak a little bit about that and also your role?
Yes, absolutely. Catapult is such an exciting place. They have a really unique structure. This is one of the things that excited me so much when I first met Andy. So they have a website and a magazine. They have a classes program, and they also have the book publishing imprint. And the beautiful thing, as Andy's described it to us, is it's this structure that they've created with porous borders. So we could have someone who maybe takes a class as a student who ends up writing for the magazine, or ends up, or it's a reader maybe who takes a class, then ends up writing for the magazine, or publishes a book with us, and everything in between, right? You have somebody who comes in for, who writes for our magazine and then publishes a book for us. It's this really beautiful, holistic structure. And it presents amazing opportunities for me as an art director. So, should I talk a little bit about that? Or?
Well, I was just thinking too that, one of the great things about publishing is how old it is. I mean, publishing houses have been around for hundreds of years, but one of the best things about Catapult is that it's new. And when I say new, it was founded in 2015. So I can imagine that your role here was, really building things. And can you speak a little bit about what that was like, building something, and whether or not, that's something that takes a very unique personality to be able to like that?
Yeah, and I absolutely love it. I am a builder, and Toomey and I, who's my co-founder, She Designs Books, often talk about how much we both love building, and I can talk more about that. But when I arrived here, so they never had an art director at Counterpoint or at Catapult. They never had an on-site creative director or art director, so they didn't have really systems in place to support an art department. So it was really creating systems for art to deal with production, for production to deal with other facets of the company, cover approval processes, just so many different things. And then also what ended up happening, as I said, I kind of came on board thinking I'd be working mostly on the books, but it's expanded so much this year in such an exciting way. I'm very tired, but it's amazing. So we have these unique challenges of, like, for instance, the Catapult Instagram grid. We've got, posts that are for the magazine. We've got classes posts. We celebrate our instructors' books. We've got the book publishing. So how do we make something that's consistent, visually on social media? So one of the things that I've gotten to do is work with the marketing team closely on the social media feeds and creating better assets and kind of guidelines for social media, but then also initiated a Catapult artist program for the magazine team to bring attention to these amazing established and emerging writers, work with beautiful artwork, which also supports visual artists, emerging and established, bringing more attention to the work, expanding that audience out, because we've got people who maybe aren't writers, maybe they're designers or artists who are now looking at those pieces, the art and the writing. So that's been incredible. We launched that in October.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's going really well. So that's I think, and then the classes team, I'm working with them on some ideas for next year, which we'll talk about at another time, and then also, creating better assets for them to promote their classes and their instructors' work in the feeds. So.
It's incredible just to hear how different it is from, yes, it's still book publishing, but there's such a larger brand to consider, and to think about, going back to that organism and how everything has implications. You don't think about, or you have to be mindful of, okay, how does this visually affect this? And it's almost like a domino effect in a way. So just going back to that attribute of building, and you briefly mentioned She Designs Books. So could you just touch a little bit about, if people don't know already, about She Designs Books?
Sure, yeah. So She Designs Books is co-founded by me and Ann Toomey, who is also a creative director over at Celadon Books. And this was concepted Actually, I'll tell you how it came to be was I cold called Anne because I was thinking about applying for a certain job, and I remember being so nervous about calling her, and we started having lunch. And at 2 different points in our careers, at 2 different ages, we were able to support each other in such a beautiful way. And we started talking about bringing this to other women and having lunches. We never got it off the ground. We talked about it a lot. We were also colleagues at Hachette for a short amount of time because Hachette had bought Basic. So we were lunching and talking and discussing issues in the industry and supporting each other. And when I gave my notice at Hachette, I pulled her into a room to let her know, and she said, we've got to launch this thing. The name came to me last night, She Designs Books. And so we kind of went from there. I had just started at Catapult, so it was a little tricky to kind of put all my attention on it, but we launched it in it was a year in January. We celebrated our first woman designer, and we had some different ideas about what we were actually going to do. It did not really involve social media, and I thought it might be good to build a community first. So we put our first post up, and we could not believe how much attention it got and how excited women and men in our field were for this platform. So, and it's just grown from there. We had about 6 events, mainly just sort of social events last year. Again, with a really deep focus on building the community and supporting women, and also getting young designers, people who wanted to become book designers or illustrators, so they could come to our events, we could connect them and network. This next year is we focus on providing resources. That's the plan. We have some exciting things that we're discussing. Hopefully they will come to pass this year. I think they will. It's going to be more about events, instruction, etc. So we'll still be promoting in the feeds, but we want to give more to women designers in the field, and men as well, really, because we all inspire each other. So
I definitely see overlap between She Designs Books and what you're doing at Catapult in terms of promoting artists that are up and coming and giving them a platform, and just, something about just whenever you're in a job, having that support and having people see and identify talent in you and nurturing that is huge. And it all comes down to, it came up when I was at Little Brown interviewing a marketing manager there, that it really is who you know. And it's not in a way where it's like, oh, I got this job through nepotism. It's, no, I was curious about someone's job. I sat down with them and I learned more. Yeah. So again, just if you're interested in publishing, or just as a reader you want to know more, people love talking about their jobs, because if you're in publishing, you're in it because you're passionate about it. There's no other reason to be in it. So speaking of being in publishing, and there's so many blog posts about morning rituals, but can you just touch briefly, because I think it says a lot about someone's day-to-day. What is a typical lunch break like for you?
A typical lunch break. So we started to Elizabeth about this the other day.
Oh, and Elizabeth, you want to introduce Elizabeth, who's holding the camera?
Elizabeth Ireland, who's a dynamo here on our marketing team, is filming. She's amazing. She set this up. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. She's super talented, and I want to actually say that quickly about the entire team here. I mean, there's just, Andy is an expert at building teams, and there are so many passionate people here. I can't even, we would use the whole interview to name them all. They're just amazing, and we feel very lucky. Yeah. So, sorry, your question. Oh, lunches. So I told Elizabeth the other day, I should probably not talk about how I basically subsist on chocolate some days, and like right at the snack drawer and work right through my lunch break. So sometimes it looks like that.
Dark or light chocolate?
Dark.
Okay. Okay, well that's okay. You don't see color when it comes to chocolate. It's all chocolate.
So some of the more self-caring lunches will take place over at Maysville, which is a great little,
I've been
it's
there
actually a bourbon place.
I was just going to say I've been there for bourbon.
I don't go for the bourbon, but I do go for the burger and manuscript time. So I will go over there and read and sketch and just get into a quiet space. I will meet Ann Toomey over there sometimes to talk about She Designs Books events, because she's right over in the Flatiron.
Right, and also because you did bring up Celadon, I just want to give a shout out to Celadon, because they also are new. They're an imprint at Macmillan, but they're very new and doing some really great books. In fact, Silent Patient is one of their huge books,
Yeah.
and right out of the gate got a book of the month. So just want to give a shout out to Celadon because I'm definitely a fan of theirs as well.
Definitely, yeah. And Anne's doing amazing work over there, and I'm not biased. She's incredible. And then sometimes I will head over to Rizzoli and either photograph.
Where I used to work.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, so
Such a beautiful store.
it's a beautiful store. So I also worked at Hachette, and I was the director of their speakers bureau, and loved it. But on a whim, I saw a job posting for events manager at the new Rizzoli bookstore, and I just thought I'm gonna throw caution to the wind, have my Kathleen Kelly moment, and I was the event manager. So anyways, it's just again small world.
Yeah, it's such an inspiring space. I love Rizzoli.
Beautiful. It's beautiful.
I go in there frequently, look through the books for inspiration, photograph books for the feeds. I love that she designs books taking little stories and tagging all the designers. And then we have a park nearby, so if I really feel like I take care of myself, I'll go for a walk around the park and sit on a bench for a little while. But
Good people watching there too.
yeah,
Madison's
good people watching. Oftentimes, I will say that I work through my lunches. Not proud of that. It's definitely something I shouldn't be doing because I do feel like having the space to stop is where a lot of inspiration comes from. The kind of boring moments where you're just not filling your brain with things and trying to force ideas. So, yeah.
So speaking of ideas, this is a good opportunity to jump into the two books that we're gonna be talking about today. So we're gonna do a little bit of a background about two different covers, how they came to be. The first is gonna be Sea Monsters, and we're also gonna be talking about the Atlas of Reds and Blues.
Yes.
So you wanna just briefly kind of talk about your role in each?
Sure. So for Sea Monsters,
I can pull that one.
sure.
Also, quickly, how this came to be is that, or this interview came up, is that I was having coffee with Elizabeth and she gave me this, and I immediately said, Catapult has the best covers. I need to learn more about that. And I don't know how it's showing up on the screen, but this has such an interesting glimmer to it, and it's just very, very striking. So
I'm so glad you like it. Yeah, so this project I art directed and worked with Stricken Williams, who again, look them up there.
And great Instagram.
Yeah. And then this book I actually designed myself. So the Atlas of Reds and Blues.
Okay.
But I'll talk about Sea Monsters first. So this was a great process, and I think just such a good example for viewers who wonder about what goes into covers. Some of them come to be quickly, and some of them need some pushing and some revisions and feedback from all parties, and that was the case with this one, so it's a great one to talk about. So Sea Monsters follows Louisa, a teenager in Mexico City in the 80s, as she searches for a group of Ukrainian dwarves. There's strong references to music throughout the book. Nick Cave, Joy Division. She meets some interesting characters along the way, and it's mainly her relationship with another character called Thomas. So the ask on the cover memo and when we launched the book was for something that was very cool, very edgy, possibly typographic only, post-punk, and mysterious. And the author had some specific asks, which were no colorful Mexican cliches, avoid sea monsters altogether. She was really nervous that with that amazing title that people would think it was about sea monsters. And she loved silhouettes, nocturnal shapes. And she had some paintings that she sent by a German artist that felt a little too precise, but we were able to glean a little bit of color inspiration from them.
So just really briefly right there, I want to interject about the actual book itself, because you mentioned that it felt too precise. I haven't finished it yet, but having fallen in love with the prose first and foremost, it's so lyrical and fluid that I really picked up on when you said it's too precise, because just this feels very organic. And then also too, I'm fascinated. So do most authors, when they're working on a book, do they have opinions about the covers, or is it really dependent upon the book and the author?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they have too many opinions and they can be limiting to a designer. But in this case, yeah, so it really depends. Sometimes we have authors that are really self-deprecating and are like, this is not my forte, I trust your team, go for it. And then sometimes we have authors that will send their favorite artists. Things to stay away from are always really, useful. We're actually going to be changing our cover brief process here, and one of the questions I'd like to ask authors is, where did the title come from? Because I think that that's really valid. Hopefully the designers are reading the whole manuscript, but it's helpful just in case they can't get through the whole thing or something. So yeah, it depends on the case, but we do usually, especially here at Catapult, we do ask our authors for their input. We're very strong into author care here. So, yeah. And I think most places are, so. So we started with something that was quite different. So, and Charlotte and Claire were amazing and humble and let me show these early drafts. So,
which are so beautiful.
They really are, yeah, but they're just very different. From where we went. So this was in the first round. So I was concerned about this because it felt like maybe it might fall into that cliche beach scene, and it didn't feel like rough and gritty enough to me. But there was something going on with the colors that was really nice. So sometimes it's like you kind of take from each thing and kind of make your way to the final. This was also included in the first round. So this is where the seashells actually came into play right in the beginning. But again, it felt a little too bright. It felt too clean. But there was something there that I really liked. So then I went back to them and let them know that they didn't feel mysterious enough. I don't think the whole team had seen these early rounds. I think I just talked to Andy and Jonathan Lee, the editor, and they agreed that there was just something that wasn't aligning. So then Charlotte and Claire came back with these, which were really fun, It's really fun.
I have to be honest, I really hope, looking at these covers, there's a few where I'm like, I hope another book gets the cover.
I was just thinking so much.
Because I love that cover.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. It's really nice. It looks like a bigger book, whereas some of these look a little smaller. And then this one again, which again, it's, it might fall into that camp which the author wanted to stay away from, just being like kind of a little too beachy and uplifting. So the next round came in, and Charlotte and Claire, so I had told them they needed to be a little edgier, a little cooler. The author liked silhouettes, something a little rougher around the edges. And they had come up with, they loved the artist of Mira Chandel. So these pieces of art, which definitely were more in line with the vision that I had. And
also, having been to Mexico City, these feel like Mexico City.
Yeah.
There's just there's something very lively to it, and you can feel it in the rhythm more than the color.
Yeah.
So these are really. I can see why these were chosen for this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we went down that path, and then this came in, which again is really, we're getting there. We're getting closer, but it still felt a little too light and a little too playful. So then what ended up happening was, and I should have said this from the start, actually, Charlotte and Claire had designed this book, Large Animals, by Jess Art. And this artwork by Amy Stillman was like just implanted in my mind, probably around midway through the process, really. And I felt like this is the kind of roughness and texture and kind of heaviness that the cover needed to have. So I brought this up to them, and I also really loved this. I loved their seashells design. I just felt like there was a really nice metaphor there that they picked up on. It could represent, you know, and I think that Charlotte and Claire did mean this. It represents, you know, Louisa and Tomas, and you know how they're kind of at odds at points during the story. It also represents the place, but again, it just felt like it wasn't all the way there. So then this came in, which was they went to work and hand painted this amazing shell design, and it was perfect. And then what they did with the final was create this. This was just a texture on the cover, an overlay to kind of unify all of the different elements. And I thought, oh my God, we have to do that in raised gloss. We have to.
And it's so smart too, because I don't know why I didn't bring this up earlier. I was reading it on the subway and someone stopped me, purely based on the cover.
Really?
Yes, because it's really striking. So
Yeah.
even if you're an e-reader or audiobooks, this is one that you'll actually want to buy, because it's very relaxing to read the cover too. It looks a little weird in public, but
I do it often.
it's a really, really beautiful book.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. So we did what's called a blind gloss on this, so it has no color underneath, and it's, you know, representative of beadlets as if it was left on the beach. And it just gives a really beautiful sparkling. We were very concerned when it came in because the author really wanted something subdued. Actually, at one point we made this fluorescent, we were really playing with the colors, and she wanted something a little bit more subdued, so Charlotte and Claire went back and kind of dulled down the color a little bit to get closer to what their original was. And we were nervous about this and how the gloss would go over, but she loved it, and she, you know, it was explained that it would really be eye-catching on the shelf and kind of jump into people's hands, and so she was on board with it, and I'm so grateful she was, because I think it's just so stunning, and it really is amazing how effects can change the surface of it. I mean, it feels like eel skin. It's incredible. It doesn't even feel like paper anymore. It's so beautiful. So Charlotte and Claire did such an amazing job on this. What a gift this project was.
And this is very different from the next book we're going to talk about, which is the Atlas of Red and Blue, which you designed the cover for.
I did, yeah. So I don't get anyone to art direct me. Well, sometimes my team does. So they have great feedback. So the Atlas of Reds and Blues takes place over the course of one morning. It's told by Mother, is the title of the main character. She's an American-born Bengali immigrant. And it's told as she lies in the driveway bleeding out after being shot by a police officer.
Oh, wow. Wait, so that's how it opens?
Yeah.
I'm reading The Perfect Nanny right now, and it also has a very, very gory opening. And I'm thinking I might need a gory opener for my next book that I start, just to ease down. So I think this is going to be the next book that I read.
Yeah, great. And what's amazing is that it's absolutely heartbreaking, and there's so much pain throughout, but it's so beautifully written. Debbie Laskar has a poetry background. It's structured in such an interesting way.
Okay.
Sometimes there's 3 lines on a page. I mean, it is stunning in its detail. It was a pleasure to design for her because she creates so much visual metaphor throughout. So it's told through vivid snapshots and memories as the main character attempts to pinpoint what had led her to this moment. So it's timely, right? It's a look at racism, it's a look at the abuse of power in America, and it's heartbreaking, but gorgeously written. And so I had submitted a few, these were all in the same, so these were all in the same round. So there was this cover, which ended up being, it was between this and the final cover that the team really was drawn towards.
And that was the first.
These were all, it was all one round for this one. That's why I said it was a shorter process. Some of them go over quickly and some of them take a little more time. So there were these and this one, which is just completely different. And then this one, which is similar to one of the other ones, but with a different typeface. And yes, so This one, the discussion ended up being between this one and this one, and what ended up being the final vote was that this looked a little bit too much like a propaganda poster, and a little bit too much like it was actually just very
Political.
yeah, political and more for America. And in this case, we're talking about something very different, and these problems and issues that we're actually experiencing in our time. So this is a novel, but very closely related to what's going on in our world right now. So so it was decided to go in this direction, and the kaleidoscopic pattern is representative of this mother shifting in and out of consciousness as she's bleeding out. The blues and reds are almost neon to represent the anger in the book. There's also quite a lot of blood runs throughout the whole story. I'm not going to give it away.
Unintended. Blood running through.
Yeah, and that this, unique structure, fragmentation felt, symbolic of Debbie's writing style. And so that one was, one of the easier approval processes. It was pretty quick. The author loved it. We brought in some raised gloss. It's like one of my favorite effects, and I finally have sold Andy Hunter. I'm using it on some books. He loves it too now. But it really can create depth and bring out, some of the aspects of the cover in a really nice way. And
It's eye-catching.
Thank you.
It really is. And just both of these books are such good representatives of Catapult, because the books that get published by Counterpoint and Catapult are very distinct in the fact that these two have very unique, it sounds like from this one, and I've read Sea Monsters, very unique voices from the writers. And I'm excited to see how that plays, having the 3 words on one page. And as a designer, you must really appreciate that, because that's a very visual decision for a writer to make. It's the impact of seeing only 3 words, and that says a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's so nice to be able to take an author's writing style and bring it into, make it visual in some way. So this was amazing, and they're both recently pubbed. And I should also mention that Debbie's book was inspired by some real life issues. Her home was raided at one point. And so, you can feel that. You feel that there's a truth to the pages, and that it's very personal. So it's a really rewarding book to work on. Yeah.
Well, Nicole, this was rewarding getting to sit down with you, and I just thank you so much for taking the time, and I hope everyone enjoyed. I also want to say definitely follow Catapult, follow Counterpoint, great Instagrams, follow She Designs Books, and again, thank you for taking the time
Thank you so much.
tell us about what it's like.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. And I will see you on the next episode of Shelf Conscious.